for it, ride for it. I'ma organize for it. Stay up in the night and in the morning I'ma rise for it. Heart for it, mind for it, ears for it, eyes for it. Peace and a place on this earth for me and mine for it. Work for it, ride for it. I'ma organize for it. Stay up in the night and in the morning I'ma rise for it. Heart for it, mind for it, ears for it, eyes for it. Peace and a place on this earth for me and mine for it.
Hey, peace. Thanks for tuning into the Money, Power, Land Solidarity podcast. We are here with this special St. Paul-focused episode. This is our second time that we're crossing the river to our siblings, our comrades in St. Paul to talk about an urgent issue happening on the ground. And I'm super pleased to have a very special guest with us today. I'm welcoming to the podcast Tish Jones. Thanks for joining us.
Yo, man. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
I'm not going to get too deep into the backstory, but I have to say on the microphone that perhaps nobody has played a more formational role in my life as a creative person, as an artist. Like literally no podcast without Tish Jones, because one night when I was probably like in between my freshman and sophomore year of college, a friend of mine brought me to the Blue Now open mic, and I introduced myself to you after you hit the microphone and just lit my soul on fire. And from right then, it was like the push I needed to realize, like, I'm a poet. I'm supposed to be up on that stage saying things and writing things. Literally one of the most formational nights of my life. So thank you, Tish.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. That's a good reflection and memory.
Hell yeah, definitely. So here we are today. Could you just introduce yourself to our listeners, a little bit about who you are and what your work is?
Yeah, no doubt. My name is Tish Jones. I am a poet, organizer, educator, cultural producer, mega black, hella black, stupid black, dumb black, grandiose black, universe black, black. And really, man, I'm the product of my ancestors, their labor, their work, their life, their death, their loss, their struggle, their persistence. And I'm an auntie, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter. I'm all those things. We're just out here trying to function.
Amen. Amen. And we're here today to talk about the ReConnect Rondo project. There's an effort to build a land bridge and really remake the Rondo neighborhood. So to get into that conversation, I want to start by setting the context. Some listeners might be aware when you hear the word Rondo, that's a charged name in the Twin Cities. Could you describe what is the Rondo neighborhood? What is Old Rondo? What's the significance of Rondo to Black Minnesota and to Minnesota in general?
Yeah, Rondo is one of those, it's considered still a historically Black neighborhood. One of the oldest, largest, and in its heyday, thriving Black neighborhoods and Black communities in terms of when Black folks, after Black folks migrated north and found other places to exist after fleeing from racial terror in the U.S. South. So Rondo was, it had, 900 Black-owned homes and businesses and property owners and et cetera, like I said, in its prime. And it was destroyed by the construction of 94. It ripped right through the community. Folks lost their homes. Some of the elders and leaders that, some we're still blessed to have, some we've lost. Like, they put their bodies on the line. They laid their bodies in the ditch as they were building this freeway to protest this effort and try to keep the Rondo community together. Grocery stores, pharmacies, you name it, we had it in our community. I think a quick reference is, when you think about Tulsa and Oklahoma and what people refer to as Black Wall Street, like we had our own Black Wall Street here,
Wow. And do you know, was that like the 1960s, the 1950s?
So the desire to build the freeway came in the 50s and it came to fruition in the 60s. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this is like one of the first pieces of local history that I learned that started to open my perspective to white supremacy in the United States. My parents telling me this was a thriving Black community. This freeway wasn't always here, and they chose to build it here specifically because it was a thriving Black community there. Yes. So can you talk about now, how has Rondo fared from there, and like bring us up to the present day? What's the neighborhood like now?
So before I do that, I also want to name that that's not an anomaly, right?
Right.
That, Like black communities, brown communities were chosen. You know what I mean? We were targeted in terms of the way the freeways went through the hood. That's the etymology of hip hop. And as two hip hop practitioners, it's really important to name, like, to me, all of the connections and the synergy that we have. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I think also, this podcast was started out of a similar struggle around the Upper Harbor Terminal development, which is a huge reinvestment in North Minneapolis. And the Upper Harbor Terminal is a stone's throw from the same freeway, 94, which also ripped through North Minneapolis, which isn't as public as Rondo, or as well studied, but it's a similar dynamic where it was poor Black and Jewish people who were forced out of their homes for 94 to be built there. And for us to contextualize gentrification, so why is the big millions of dollars coming back to the north side now? The first part was the divestment and the ripping up of the neighborhoods in the 50s and 60s, which drove the property values down. White people sat on that property for a long time. Now that the conditions have changed, they're trying to buy cheap, and this is them recouping their profits. So it's not a coincidence that it's happening in both Minneapolis and St. Paul, and that it's happening in mid-sized and large cities across the country where these Black communities were attacked and divested from, and now they're the targets of predatory investment.
Indeed. I mean, there's so many layers, man, because also when you think about Rondo and rezoning and everything that happens as well, right? So like Rondo also leaning into Frogtown, respectively, also leaning into Summit U, respectively, and now, Union Park and like the different areas in which people are going to benefit. But also refugees, fam. Like one of the things that is like, we grew up with, like going to school, living next to, et cetera, with Hmong folk, with Lao folk, with Vietnamese folk. Like, so refugee communities also are placed in brown communities, right? So these are also not just, for me, when I think about the way that folks are attacking these communities right now, I'm also like, yo, you're really attacking BIPOC communities right now. Like legit, you're attacking refugees. And this is the first home that these folks have known as well, because this is where you strategically place them in the quote unquote ghetto. And then the reversal of white flight is another context that has to be a part of this conversation. So it's like after cats dipped out because they didn't want to be around brown people, now they want to come back in. Yeah. And because it's affordable.
Facts. I mean, I think about, me and my partner a couple years ago went to go try out Jay Selby's. The little vegan spot. And my spidey senses were going crazy because being from Northeast and seeing how a literal corner that these people would never stop at, would rush past, would lock their doors when they came by, which was a place for working class life, and the racial dynamics are different over Northeast, but it's a real similar dynamic, are now hipster vegan restaurants. And I'm in there and I'm looking around, I see everything. I see the contrast in aesthetics from the older buildings to the new buildings. I'm looking across, I see like, okay, I'm in the hood right now, but in here, I'm with a bunch of well-to-do kind of up, so I recognize that it's like, this is happening in the context of gentrification.
In terms of what the neighborhood looks like right now, you know what I mean? I think that it's hard, man, because gentrification is happening, has been happening, and you even bringing up Jay Selby is a great point. You know what I mean? Like we've lost so many of our resources. We've lost so many of our spaces. So not even just when Rondo was in his heyday. So not just before the freeway was originally built. I mean, since then, we've not been able to keep our businesses and our homes in that place for many different reasons. Right now, we're lacking in schools that are for us in that space. We're lacking in houses that are for us in that space. And some of the underground footwork that we've done, man, what we're seeing is what ReConnect Rondo refers to as new neighbors. So we're seeing new neighbors in homes that Black people build with their hands. You know what I mean? Like that's the biggest upset, is there are Black folks who are riding by their homes, and since they were forced out, since they lost their home, they have not seen another Black person in them. You know what I mean?
It's heartbreaking to think of that. It's just absolutely heartbreaking. What I've noticed too is my wife was getting her, what's it called? It's not postpartum, but while she was pregnant, she was getting acupuncture at a spot on Selby right there. And I would drive by and just be like, damn, these houses are beautiful. And you can see right there and to imagine like the Black families that lived generations in those homes to just be forced out, it's just like, it rips you apart.
Yo, Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible. Yeah, I think we're dealing with that right now. You know what I'm saying? I think we're dealing with being priced out right now. That's what it really looks like. I mean, again, in some of the underground footwork that we did, just trying to do some counter organizing against this land bridge, we found, on average, if you're on the north side of the freeway, your property taxes are around 3.5. You know what I mean? If you're on the south side of the freeway, property taxes are around 4. But if you're a new neighbor on either side, what they disclose to us is that their property taxes are on average 6,000. Right? So we got black folks in their homes, who are trying to pay 3.5, trying to pay 4. And we've got new neighbors who are coming in who can afford to pay 4, or afford to pay 6, excuse me. And with the $500 million initiative coming in, I wonder what the property taxes are going to be and if we won't get priced out of our home.
That's incredible because it's such a similar dynamic to what door knocking over north around the Upper Harbor revealed. A similar dynamic is that the few working class people, black people who still own their homes over north were largely older folks who were trying to pay their mortgage on a fixed income.
On a fixed
income.
And
the property taxes were the thing that were driving them out. So people talk about rent control.
Exactly.
And then you see the way that white supremacy is inherent in the way that property is valued in capitalism in the United States, because it's a white new neighbor.
Yep.
That means that home is taxed at a higher rate. Maybe they're making more money, but what the assessor says is this is now an up-and-coming neighborhood. These white people are here, and that becomes like the churning wheel that drives everybody's property value up, and it's a weapon against the working people who live there, against the poor people, the black people. So let's take a step back for a second, because we're already getting into the weeds, and I'm so excited to learn about this. But how did you become hip to the ReConnect Rondo? It seems like I don't know how long you've been following it, but I realized lately you've been making a big push and drawing a lot of attention. So can you walk us through, what was that moment for you where you were like, fuck it, I'm going all in on this?
So this is the thing where it's like where I feel manipulated and where I feel like most of the people in the community are manipulated. So I've heard about the land bridge as an idea for years, right?
What's a land bridge?
Exactly. What's a land bridge? Exactly, right? Yo, they've been doing the work for 7 years and people are still like, what's a land bridge? It's a $500 million initiative. So for me, it's like, not only should everyone in Minneapolis should know about it, everyone in the surrounding suburbs should know about it, and everyone in St. Paul should know about it, because a $500 million investment is going to affect all of us, especially because it's a cap. They're building a land cap on top of the freeway.
So for people, you can imagine this in your city if you're not from the Twin Cities. 94 cuts like a valley through St. Paul, where there used to be homes in a black neighborhood. They dug a huge tunnel in the earth, and you drive below it, and then some bridges go across, every 6 blocks a mile or something like that. And they're talking about building a large cap reconnecting ReConnect Rondo.
Yeah. Yeah. They're building a 1/4-mile land cap on top of the freeway.
Goddamn.
Yeah. And that's going to affect everybody. Construction for that thing is going to affect everybody, right? And all that they decide they want to build on top of it is going to affect everyone in the state, everyone who comes from out of this state to work, et cetera. So we should all be more informed.
And again, just to for the geography for people, we're talking about a hop, skip, and a jump from the state capitol, from downtown St. Paul, from the Basilica, from some of a state center of commerce and tourism. Exactly. It's like when I think about Rondo, I think about St. Paul. I've never been to Washington, D.C., but it makes me think of Washington, D.C. because you see the ornate old buildings. You see our version of the little White House or whatever, the Capitol. And then you turn the corner, it's like, goddamn, I'm in the projects now. You know what I'm saying? And you really see America right there, just the contrast.
For sure. So I've heard about it for years as an idea, right? And, there's been all this stuff happening in communities, little spots on TV, whatnot, whatever. But then there were whispers earlier this year, back in April and May, that they were planning to break ground in 2027. And that's when, my antennas went up like, yo, word, how we go from an idea to we breaking ground in 20. I need to know more. I need to learn more about it, etc. So I'm like tapping in. And what it was myself and one of my collaborators and comrades in this fight, Pavio French, she dug around and found a link to a quote-unquote listening session I'm going to just say this as a caveat. As an organizer, when I hear listening session, I think that the organizers are going to be listening to the people. You know what I'm saying? That's how I was trained. That's how I came up. So we go to this quote unquote listening session and we're being told about a health impact study that has been done on black people in the neighborhood and has been done on the neighborhood. So we're listening to people who ReConnect Rondo framed as their
Back to the listening session. It's real life. We're recording out here in real life, you know.
Yo. I love that. Anyway, man, we went to this listening session or whatever, and, you know, we were asking these questions. We asked them, you know, if they were going to be breaking ground in 2027. Didn't get a firm answer on that. We asked if they had talked to people about the property taxes and where there was a, you know, if you got all these studies, where's the study around the property taxes? There was not one. One is not existent. And mind you, they've been working on this for 7 years, right? So then we asked, I specifically was like, okay, well, what's going on? Like, where's something that is comprehensive that tells me what black people want? You know, have you talked? I want to see the study that shows what black homeowners, black property owners, black business owners, black landowners in the area, what have they said? What are their concerns? What do they want? What don't they want? Etc. I was given a runaround, and you know, I was not appreciative of being given a runaround. You know what I mean? I was sent, go look on the website. I look on the website. There's nothing there. I come back to the thing. I'm like, hey, this thing you said is there doesn't exist, and it just kind of sent off from there because it felt. You know, like those kinds of tactics are really manipulative. And when you don't have the answer, instead of saying, I don't have the answer, or we haven't done that work, or I don't know, or, you know what I'm saying? But to send someone on a wild goose chase for this data, it felt really disrespectful. And then on top of that, after, you know, the acknowledgement of the lack of information that they claim to have, then it was like, hey, well, help us. Y'all, you should help us. And you know, we'll come to your thing. If you have a thing, we'll come tell you all about it. And it's like, you know, respectfully, I'm not here for you to tell me all about it. I hear what you're telling me. You're telling me that your health impact study done by people who aren't black are saying black people are obese, so they need more green space and walkability. And if black people aren't telling you that they don't want to be fat, and if black people aren't telling you that they want green space and walkability in dog parks, then don't put dog parks here on our name. And on our ancestors' names. That for me is mad disrespectful. The biggest point of tension for me around this project is that they're centering the trauma that black folks experienced when I-94 was built as the primary, you know, point of this quote unquote reconnection, but they haven't consulted with black people.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it started for me in May. The day was May 25th. I will never forget it. That was the first listening session, quote unquote, where we had to, you know, hear about how unhealthy we were and how that validated a dog park.
It's like so resonant with the experience of following the Upper Harbor Terminal. And I'm so thankful for you and your work because 98% of the time, the runaround is the end of the story. Somebody with a good heart and somebody with some keen sense, somebody from the community comes to the meeting and asks a poignant question and they get the runaround and they don't have the skills or they don't have the time to follow up and come back and hold that person accountable. And there's a whole industry of consultants, of professional managerial class people who work for nonprofits or who work for the government, whose whole job is giving people the runaround. And it's two themes I see that is like the way they brand these products is like green gentrification, the idea that, it's a food desert and people are fat and the air is bad, so we're going to build a park, but not get serious about what that's going to do to the rent, what's that going to do to the property taxes, who's going to be around. But you could just say, this is green for the, you know, and it's a way to greenwash capitalist white supremacy. And the same thing with for Rondo, they see that they can't ignore what happened with 94, so they have to appropriate that trauma and say that they're addressing it. And it's the same thing with the Upper Harbor over North. They'll give all the facts. They'll make a racial justice statement. They're in there talking about, I was in a meeting one time and they're talking about they're giving a report of the racial equity metrics that are going to be involved in the project. And I looked and they have a pamphlet right in front of you of all the companies that contributed to this study. They were all white and all from out of town. So they're literally telling you how this is going to be the best thing.
Yep.
We're scoring all the ways it's going to address black people, and they're literally already spending millions on nothing but white people from out of town. It's just no
Yo.
shame whatsoever.
Let me tell you what makes 2 points to your point that make this even worse, right? So one of the biggest issues that we have with this situation is that this project and how it came to be, they have been working with the Urban Land Institute. Now, folks who have been involved, 7 years ago, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, black people have said, we don't want to work with the Urban Land Institute. Here's why we don't want to work with the Urban Land Institute. They have a known and documented history of racism, not only in Minnesota, but throughout the United States. So we don't want, if this project is really about black people and healing from the trauma of 94, specifically the trauma for black folks and what they experienced, why would we work with a known racist institution? And we've been asking that question. What's the real relationship? Why are you working with these historically racist white developers who, they issued an apology for sure. And best practice shows that if this is really a project that's about leading black people to prosperity, which is ReConnect Rondo's tagline, which I also think is horrendous.
Wow.
Yeah, I think, the appropriation of Christian rhetoric and all that is terrible. And anyway, so if they're really leading black people to prosperity, why is the primary development partner a historically white racist institution? Why are we not working with folks in the area, black folks in the area who have that skill, who work on projects, large scale projects? Why are we sourcing out to them? And they won't answer that question, right? They won't talk about the free designs that they got. What is the exchange there? You know what I'm saying? And cool. Urban Land Institute issued an apology for the use of racist names for the racial cover. Cool. Let's see what happens in practice, though. Word, lip service, we're off lip service. Same thing with MnDOT, right? So after a lot of our organizing, one of the things that came up that's, again, a terrible counterpoint to this, this prosperity thing that they're trying to sell the community is MnDOT is going to own the land bridge. We will not own the land bridge. What that means, that takes away half of the economic opportunity right there, because we can't actually obtain wealth in a manner in which we could if we owned the homes, if we owned the land. That's facts. The other issue is that MnDOT 5-6 years ago issued another apology for what happened with I-94. If you are apologetic, you don't drive this project. That's just what it is. So we have these same things. He's like, let's, do this performative justice thing. Let's do this performative allyship thing. And let's large white racist institutions, wings, arms of the state, make these apologies. But the worst thing for me with ReConnect Rondo is that the board of directors has 10 black people sitting on it, a third of them elders. And the executive director of ReConnect Rondo is a black man. So the part that is like heartbreaking, right, is that these are black people who are serving as the face of this project and driving this project while not consulting with the residents, black, white, otherwise, and working on behalf of the state.
I think it's a very important fact to raise, and I'm speaking on it humbly, being a white man, not from the neighborhood, but it's a process, it's a reality, a dynamic I see in the Upper Harbor too. They had this in a response to an attempt to co-opt the organizing. Then the city council created this committee, and they put on the committee old conservative black people who have ties to the development team. The person in the meeting who talks the most and claims the mantle of the north side the most, I learned he lives in Plymouth. He has rental property over north. He's a black conservative Republican landlord type individual, So it's like the ways that white supremacy can co-opt then, and they put this like, people who are willing to sell the community out. And we have to be able to have nuance, to recognize that like, it's just like you said, you have to go beyond performative apologetics, and you have to go beyond a face that's representation and really be talking about redistribution through the whole community. And like, yeah,
the ties to these institutions are real. The executive director of ReConnect Rondo worked for MnDOT for 18 years.
Wow.
And is now the executive director of ReConnect Rondo, driving a $500 million land bridge project on behalf of MnDOT.
Yeah, it's just like it's textbook revolving door. Again, same thing with what I learned in my research in the Upper Harbor. It's like, okay, you mean the director of CPED, the real estate arm of the city of Minneapolis that gives the development contracts and catalyzes the developments. He came directly from the private real estate industry, and these people are in a small circle where really like the job of the official is to further the interests of capitalist real estate. And it sounds exactly the same situation in Rondo, Yeah, where it's like, and that's the other thing is one thing we've talked about a lot in this podcast, or not a lot, but in one episode it came up, and I want to bring this concept back, is the capitalist democracy contradiction. It came out of a man named Richard Fogelsong, wrote a book about urban planning and gentrification, and basically saying in our society, they have to present the image that they're including the people. So they have to include just enough people, or they have to at least put a link up there to a listening session. But the demands of property mean they can't actually address the people of Rondo's needs or ask like the masses of black people in Rondo what they want, because they know that means that, hire us, give it back to us. They can't do that. So it becomes this, and that's what this whole industry of planners and kind of bureaucrats who create these websites and do this false engagement, and nobody ever follows up on it, and it's just a way that it's like the soft power arm of the whole mission.
I mean, what's really disgusting is that being on that first Zoom and being told, when you have a thing, we'll come and tell you about our thing at your thing. And it's like, nah, that's me doing the labor for you to do your job. And what makes it worse is that, and I want to say this too, man, because one of the things that, is a divisive tactic of white supremacy, and it shows up in black people often too, is like this personalization of things. There's been a lot of personal attacks. And the biggest one is, you don't respect the elders. And it's like, nah, I had so much respect for all of these elders. And this has never been about disrespecting the elders. What it is these elders are sitting at this table throwing the black community away. They knowingly collected only 40 surveys over the course of 7 years. They know that. And the politicians who are lobbying for them to get money. So the state just allocated $6.2 million to them a couple weeks ago, right? And those politicians, for me, all of y'all are culpable in this process, right? To your point, because you put a listening session up, and if people don't know about it, that's their fault. We're on TV. People have heard, everybody, and it's like, nah, man.
We ran a spot on KMOJ.
You feel me? When we're on the ground door knocking, and 70% of the people we talk to say that they have not engaged with you all at all. You know what I mean? Like, haven't heard from you, haven't been to a thing, haven't attended a listening session, did not know. Come on, man. Like, that's where the real truth lies. You know what I mean? And because there's no, like, how do I know that the 15 black people who were a part of that survey 10 of them weren't on the board already? Right. How do I know that? You know what I mean? There's no way of knowing. They're not being really transparent. It's really unfortunate. But the attacks saying that we don't respect the elders have been a really gross part of this process, because what it does is it allows them to be elusive and to evade responsibility for what they're doing right now. Yeah. It's like, man, I'm one of the co-founders of Rondo Days. So, I care about Rondo. I helped build the Rondo Plaza. So I care about Rondo. Meanwhile, you have a $459 million initiative that you're not telling anyone in Rondo about, black, white, or otherwise. I want to see your ethic of care be a part of this project too. You know what I mean? For the elders who laid their bodies in the ditch, I want to see the thing that motivated you to lay your body in the ditch and stop the freeway from being built should be the same thing that motivates you to get black people out to the table. Last thing I'm gonna say too, what feels really gross about this, to your point, is two of the city and so the city's aide to Melvin Carter, who's the mayor, Melvin Carter III, who is the mayor. He sits on the board as a voting member. Ramsey County Commissioner Tony Carter, Melvin Carter III's mother, her aide sits on the board as a voting member. Okay? So, and Rena Moran came by the event that we had last night, and
she's a state representative.
She is a state representative, and she came by the event last night and said, "Hey, it's all about politics. This is all about politics, and it shouldn't matter who used to work for MnDOT. It doesn't matter that the executive director of ReConnect Rondo worked for MnDOT. And it's like, but meanwhile, in the same breath, it's divisive, it's a distraction. So she came by last night and, in my opinion, tried to distract the people. Say, oh, no, you need to know about rethinking I-94. We know about rethinking I-94. In fact, your the board members of ReConnect Rondo are the folks who told us that they're trying to get this project done in time to do it in tandem with the reconstruction of 94. So we know about it, and we know that their agenda is to get as much money as possible, as quickly as possible, even if it means leaving people out, because it's cheaper for them to get it done while they build the freeway.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And for her to come and try to pivot and say, well, MnDOT is going to rethink 94, so that's really what we need to focus on. It's like, nah, we actually don't really need to focus on that. That's happening already. We're seeing 35W has been, there's reimagining Penn Avenue is happening now. Light rails are being built everywhere. We understand that the Department of Transportation has their own motivation in this community, and we understand it's about bringing white people in and getting white people out really quickly until they can buy up all the property and kick all the brown people out of the cities. Right. We get that. But for you to try to divert people's attention away from this land bridge and the fact that they've been excluded, that's bad politics to me. It's bad politics to me that the city and the county are on record like, we've lobbied for this project forever. We want them to get money. And we know that they've only collected 40 surveys in 7 years, but we still wanted them to get $6.2 million.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's like, again, it's just so resonant what you're describing. And I think what's important is when you have somebody like yourself and the people that you're around, and this has been really informative. So I just asked maybe one more question after this, but just to say, what we need is independent, bottom up, working class political action and revolutionary-minded political action. I don't mean to use that catchphrase, but it's when you got somebody like Rita Moran or people who sit on these various initiatives coming from the state, they all have the same goal, and their job is to just keep the hamster wheel going. It's like you're not standing in the way of the momentum, so anything that comes your way that's packaged in a certain way, you're gonna say, yeah, let's move the project, or push you around to think that if you spend your energy on another state-sponsored project following some process that they have laid out for you, that's just a send-off. It's always going to be a send-off. And for you to organize people into state values, to state principles, and to state of vision and not get sent on those paths, that's huge, And I see that connection being made across the cities right now. I think the work that's done around the Upper Harbor Terminal, we've been able to keep our eye on the ball to a certain extent and learn those lessons. And I talked to some other really powerful people from St. Paul, the Midway Rise Up, on that project that's right there by the Wilder Foundation, and people also being able to see through that. It's incredible. And I think it's as these hot spots and battles are being fought, I'm excited for us all to keep linking together and talking together and learning the lessons together and becoming even more proactive about developing our communities the way we want them to be developed.
Indeed.
Can you talk a little bit just about, so what's the organizing look like? What have y'all, since you snapped into gear, what have y'all done? And if people are listening to this and want to show some support, how could they do that?
Yo, first things first, please sign this petition. We have a petition right now to the city, the county, and the state. So Melvin Carter III, like I mentioned, the mayor, to the Ramsey County Commissioner Tony Carter, to the governor, the lieutenant governor, the state representatives who wrote the bill, and the state representatives who lobbied for the bill, right? So please sign the petition. It's on change.org. It's Preserve Rondo.
We'll link to it in the show notes for sure.
Appreciate that. So that's the very first thing, because what we need to do is show that there are active, concerned citizens here, everywhere, who are interested in seeing people receive justice, who are interested in not continuing to further traumatize the Black community or watch them be exploited, watch their pain be exploited as dog parks are built for the new neighbors who walk their dogs through the hood.
That was the same issue that really catalyzed organizing at King Park in the 2000s. They tried to come in and build a dog park at King Park, and they were like, fuck that. It's not happening, Never happening. That's just an egregious, You
know what I feel really terrible about, right? The heartbreaking part of this is Black folks in Rondo are so defeated. And because there's a Black mayor right now, there's so much, there's just such dissatisfaction where they're feeling mega helpless. He wants this land bridge. His aide is on the thing. His mother is a county commissioner. She wants this land bridge. Her aid is on the thing. Like, they just feel like there's nothing they can do because there are certain blacks that supposedly represent all of the rest of black people over there. You know what I'm saying? So folks are like, how do they get their voice heard? The people we've talked to are not interested in this land bridge happening. At least not interested in this land bridge happening the way that it's happening without their voices being included, right? So to that point, they're not interested in this land bridge happening. You know what I mean? And they're not bought on what ReConnect Rondo is selling because, for the timeline situation, so some of the first things we did, to be honest with you, where we tried to be respectful of the elders at the table, we actually gave them the benefit of the doubt and believed that they had our best interest in mind and perhaps just didn't know what they were doing, right? So we tried to have private conversations with them. The last week of May, the first week of June was a lot of us doing private outreach to be able to sit with our elders who are on that board driving this project and be like, hey, what's up? Like, how is this happening? Why haven't black people been informed? Why don't people know about this? Are you breaking ground? What's up with the property taxes? Our people still live here. What's good? And they denied us every meeting we asked for. Every meeting we asked for.
Yeah.
One board member came to a community meeting that I organized as a concerned community member, but not as a board member. They've made nasty remarks that we haven't disclosed to the public because, you know, we're not interested in disrespecting the elders, but those are things that have happened, right? So then from there, in terms of the meetings being denied, like we told them straight up, like, hey, if y'all aren't going to talk with us and we can't get the answers from you, we're going to open this up publicly. Like, here are the things that we're demanding from y'all. And they were demands because we're being denied. Like, we could have had a conversation. There could have been questions we were asking, but since we were not invited to ask those questions, they became demands because of the opposition. So sent them a list of demands, asked for them to get at us. There's a claim that there were some technical difficulties. I'm going to say that they didn't get at us, right?
Right.
By the time we asked them to get at us. So,
oh, you text? I didn't even see your text, bro.
Yo, you know what I mean? Like, so it's like, oh man, wrong email. I'm like, yo, we've been on this thread. You done said a lot of things on this thread, but now you don't. Now you hit the other. Okay, that's cool. All right, cool.
Oh man.
So we shared the demands publicly. You know what I mean? It had to happen. So they shared the demands publicly. And the demands were out there so that other people could start to be curious about this and ask questions, right? Set up a Zoom call. We had a Zoom call on June 28th. Another thing, man, we invited these folks to hold space, gave them a deadline, everything. Deadline passes. Meanwhile, we're door knocking because we want to have data to share. So we're out in the streets, right? The board chair, Mr. Marvin Anderson, gets handed a flyer, again, after the deadline to confirm that he wants to be a part of our Zoom presentation because he said he speaks for the board. So if he doesn't say it to us, it ain't fact. So after the deadline, he gets a flyer from some of the youth workers that we were working with.
Just
and
on random, like out there giving out
Out
flyers,
there.
and he happens to get one.
Out there, guess
He
one.
was mad.
Hot.
I can see him right now, steam boiling. Like,
Yo, he gets handed a flyer, and then we get the request for them to be a part of the thing, right? And again, it's more quote-unquote technical difficulties. Supposedly something was sent that we didn't get by the debt, but nah.
Right.
We get the request after they get handed the flyer, right? We were still gracious and respectful and gave them time. Worst part about that situation is we intentionally put them in the program right after the community had 30 minutes to ask them questions. We went through a timeline, independent timeline again, because they won't talk to us. So this is all independent research that we've done that dates back to 2009. They sent us 2 files and asked us to share them. One of those files being the file that says that they've only collected 40 surveys over the last 7 years. And they asked us to share this information. So we did that. And now they're mad that we're talking about y'all only collected 40 surveys. Anyway. So we shared this information that we were asked to share. We put together the timeline that we've researched, and 30 minutes of community questions. And we made sure that the Zoom was a Zoom for Black people only, and we did a live for everyone else who was not Black, so that Black people could be the first people to ask questions of ReConnect Rondo. Because, you know, culturally, right, there's this like, it has to happen in the house thing. Anyway, Black people ask questions for 30 minutes. ReConnect Rondo has, it was 15 to 20 minutes to respond. I don't remember which one. And they didn't respond to a single question that was asked by these people, right?
Just went on about their own shit.
They did another presentation about what they had already been doing, and about what their past was, what their legacy was, and who the black people were. You know, I'll take that back. The question they answered was who is on the board. They did answer that question. And they mistakenly said that one person was a resident of Rondo who is not a resident, or a descendant of Rondo who's not a descendant. But they answered that question. Beyond that, they didn't answer any questions that the people had asked for a solid 30 minutes.
Ugh.
You know, it was really gross. And then from there, yesterday, July 27th, we had a public community forum where we curated speakers so that descendants of Rondo, one of the things that we think is really important is to continue to amplify the voices of regular, everyday people from the hood, from Rondo, because they're not being counted and they're not being heard. So yesterday was really just about that. It's about, yo, you from here, you live here, what do you want for this community? How do we raise your voice? How do we amplify your voice? So that's what yesterday was, curated opportunity for folks who are from here to be heard, you know what I'm saying, and to have their voices shared and amplified. Open invitation, ReConnect Rondo didn't come. That same one board member who has tried really hard to at least be in the conversation, that one board member showed up, and no one else, right? Yeah. And Daitao was supposed to come, but also didn't show up.
That's a city council person?
City council person, represents that area, Ward 1, that area. And Rena Moran came at the end, and I'm going to just say, didn't really keep it a buck with the people. And did a lot of manipulation of words and facts and things like that, and tried to divert people's attention to MnDOT and rethinking 94, because the land bridge, as it stands, is a terrible concept that is very violent and has been a violent attack against black people. Yeah.
Hell yeah. Well, I got to say salute to you and salute to all your comrades that you're working with. I know you mentioned Pavio French's name. And I think one thing for listeners, you know, is to understand just like the power of arts and culture. Like Tish is a poet and Pavio is an incredible vocalist and songwriter. And the fact that you're using your ability with language and the relationships that you have and the power you have in the community to like really bring this to the people, it's like super exciting to me, because I'm sure like a lot of people, I feel beat down sometimes, you know, just to see this steamroller happen over and over and over again. And to know that, you know, you all are not just letting it happen like that, and you're doing what they should have been doing and going out to the people and getting people involved, like the implications of that, even beyond this one struggle, as far as like that really can turn a light on in somebody that never goes out and propels them to get involved. It's just like, it's really inspiring, and I encourage listeners to sign the petition and get in where you fit in, you know, see if you could show support. If you're in St. Paul, if you're, you know, around Rondo, connected to Rondo, reach out and get involved. I want to say thank you so much, Tish. You make us all so proud.
Yo, man, thank you. Thank you for all of your work. Thank you for this podcast. Thank you for, you know what I'm saying, being a voice of the people and fighting gentrification.
Hell yeah. Can I share one more little last thing I thought about during this is we just had a son, and our son is named Maceo. And what I learned is that most black Maceos in the United States are named after Antonio Maceo Grajales in Cuba, who was a Afro-Cuban revolutionary in the period of independence. So 50 years before Fidel and them, they kicked out Spain out of Cuba, and he was very pro-black. You know, my wife is Jamaican, and he was about a pan-Caribbean revolution. And that inspired a lot of black Americans to take on the name Maceo, an adaptation of Maceo. And there was two Maceos from St. Paul who were labor leaders, like organizers with the Pullman Porters, and strong black organizers, I'm sure connected to the Rondo neighborhood. So that was like, hearing you tell that story, I'm like, that's a cool legacy. I'm thankful for that.
I appreciate you, brother. I appreciate you sharing that story.
Definitely.
Congratulations on your seat as
well.
Hey,
thank you. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Money, power, land, solidarity.
We need money, land, solidarity. If you funny, stand very far away from me. We have running plans about as far as they can see to keep them